The message from my mother came through at 11:27 at night. The screen flashed once in the dark, illuminating the photo attached to the text. It was a close-up of a brand-new brass deadbolt on the front door of the Nashville farmhouse I had spent the last 5 years restoring. Under the photo, the text read, "We changed all the locks. You don't have a home anymore. Let's see how brave you are now." For a moment, I just stared at it. The words didn't seem real. My thumb hovered above the glass. I expected tears. I expected panic. But what washed over me instead was something quieter, colder. It was clarity. I didn't type a reply. I didn't call. I sat in the silence of my temporary apartment and realized the renovation phase of my life was officially over. The demolition phase had just begun. Before we get into the betrayal, drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. To understand why that text message was a declaration of war, you have to understand the property. It wasn't a gift, it was a ruin. When my parents Joseph and Catherine bought the 3-acre plot outside Nashville, the farmhouse was a rotting shell. The roof was caving in, the floors were eaten by termites, and the foundation was cracking under the weight of 50 years of neglect. They bought it for the land value, intending to let it rot, but I saw something else. I saw a legacy. I'm a project manager for a large commercial construction firm. I speak the language of blueprints, permits, and structural integrity. I told them I would handle everything. I would act as the general contractor, the laborer, and the financier for the restoration. They agreed. They smiled, that tight, proud smile parents give when they're getting something for free, and they handed me the keys. For the next 5 years, I didn't have weekends. I didn't have holidays. I had drywall dust in my lungs and splinters in my hands. I replaced the plumbing. I rewired the electrical grid. I sourced vintage oak beams to replace the rotting supports in the living room, costing me $4,000 apiece. I didn't just invest time. I invested capital. Over 60 months, I poured exactly $145,000 of my own salary into materials, specialty labor, and high-end finishes. While I was covered in sawdust, my sister Morgan was building her brand. Morgan is 26, beautiful in that effortless, expensive way, and entirely allergic to work. She treated the farmhouse like her personal studio. She would show up when the paint was dry and the lighting was perfect, snap photos for her social media, and caption them. Restoring our family legacy is such a labor of love. My parents ate it up. They would walk through the rooms I had sanded on my hands and knees and talk about Morgan's vision. I was the one dealing with the septic tank. She was the one picking out the throw pillows. I didn't realize it then, but I wasn't a daughter to them. I was scaffolding. There is a concept in sociology called the scaffold child. It's the family member who holds the entire structure up while it's being built. You are essential, sturdy, and relied upon to bear the weight of everyone else's needs. You think your utility makes you part of the building. You think that because you are holding up the walls, you are part of the home. But you're not. Scaffolding is temporary. It is ugly. It is meant to be climbed on by the important people, the architects, and the owners. And once the building is beautiful, once the facade is painted and the lights are on, the scaffolding is taken down and hauled away so it doesn't ruin the view. That night, looking at the photo of the new lock, I realized the construction was finished. The house was beautiful. The property value had skyrocketed. They didn't need the scaffolding anymore. They were just taking me down. The cracks in the foundation had started appearing 2 weeks earlier. I had driven out to the farm to check on the grading for the new driveway, a project I was funding to improve drainage. When I walked into the kitchen, the air felt thick, heavy with a conversation that had stopped the second I opened the door. My mother was at the island, hastily folding a large, thick document. Morgan was scrolling on her phone, looking bored but smug. I asked what was going on. My father Joseph cleared his throat and said they were just looking at insurance papers. But I know paperwork. I know the density of legal documents, the specific blue tint of municipal covers. That wasn't insurance. I waited until they left for lunch, and then I went into my father's home office. I didn't have to dig deep. It was sitting right on top of the shredder pile, waiting to be destroyed. It was a zoning application, but it wasn't for a barn or a guest house. It was a request to rezone the entire 3 acres from residential to commercial. I flipped to the next page and felt the blood drain from my face. Attached to the zoning request was a letter of intent from a commercial developer. They weren't keeping the farmhouse. They weren't planning to live there in their retirement as they had promised me 1,000 times. They were selling the land to a developer who planned to bulldoze the historic home I had spent 5 years restoring to build a strip mall. The sale price was listed at $950,000. I took a picture of the document and put it back. When they returned, I confronted them. I didn't scream. I just asked why. I asked why they would destroy the home we built. I asked why they would erase 5 years of my life for a check. My mother didn't even look up from her salad. She said they needed the money for retirement. She said Morgan had a new business idea, a lifestyle brand that needed startup capital, and this sale would set her up for life. I asked about my money. I asked about the $145,000 I had invested. I asked about the equity I had earned. My father looked me in the eye, his face turning that shade of purple he gets when his authority is questioned, and said, "Ashley, that wasn't investment. That was rent. You stayed here on weekends. You treated this place like your playground. You should be grateful we didn't charge you more. Rent." He called $145,000 and 5 years of manual labor rent. I stood there frozen. I should have walked out. I should have burned the place down. But I didn't. I went back to work. I finished the driveway grading. I kept sanding the banister. There is a reason people stay in toxic situations long after they should leave, and it's called the sunk cost prison. It's a psychological trap where you cannot walk away because you have already paid so much. It's not just about the money. When you pour your sweat, your blood, and your limited time on earth into something, you aren't just investing capital. You are investing hope. You are investing your identity. To walk away feels like admitting that your love was a bad investment. It feels like admitting you were a fool. So you stay and you pour more and hoping that if you just give a little bit more, the investment will finally pay off. You think you are building equity, but you are really just building the bars of your own cell. I spent the next 2 weeks paralyzed by that fallacy, thinking I could convince them, thinking if I just finished the landscaping, they would see the value of the home and cancel the deal. Then came the text message. We changed all the locks. They didn't want a conversation. They wanted a clean break. They wanted me off the property so they could close the deal with the developer without me making a scene. They thought locking me out would break me. They thought I would come banging on the door, crying, begging to be let back in. But looking at that photo of the deadbolt, the sunk cost prison shattered. I wasn't a daughter anymore. I wasn't a sister. I was a project manager who had just been fired without cause. And in my industry, you don't cry when you get stiffed on a contract. You file paperwork. I walked over to my closet and pulled down the fireproof safe I kept on the top shelf. I dialed the combination, the tumblers clicking like the loading of a weapon. Inside was a black leather-bound notebook. I called it the log. From day one, because I am who I am, I had treated the farmhouse renovation like a professional job site. Every single receipt was taped into that book. Every invoice for lumber, copper piping, and high-end fixtures, every check I had written to subcontractors. But more importantly, I had treated my parents like clients. Every time they wanted a change, a more expensive tile, a larger deck, a specific type of window, I wrote it up as a change order and made them sign it. They thought it was a joke. They thought it was just Ashley being anal retentive, Ashley playing construction boss. They signed those pages with flourishes and smiley faces, thinking they were humoring their daughter. They didn't realize they were signing legally binding acknowledgments of debt. I sat down at my desk and opened the laptop. I didn't open my email. I opened the state's contractor portal. I searched for the property address. I pulled up the deed. And then I began to type. I didn't sue them for emotional distress. I didn't sue them for family betrayal. Courts don't care about feelings. Courts care about contracts. I was a licensed general contractor. I had performed $145,000 worth of work and materials on a property, and I had not been paid. I filed a mechanic's lien against the property title. For those who don't know, a mechanic's lien is the nuclear option in the construction world. It is a legal claim against a home for unpaid labor or materials. When you file a lien, it attaches to the property title like a parasite. You cannot sell a house with a lien on it. You cannot refinance it. You cannot transfer the deed. The title is clouded. It is frozen. I hit submit at 12:30 in the morning. The system processed the filing. A PDF generated on my screen stamped with the official county seal. I stared at it. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever created. Better than the oak beams, better than the refinished floors. It was a wall. A wall they couldn't climb, couldn't bulldoze, and couldn't charm their way through. I closed my laptop, turned off my phone, and went to sleep. The next morning, I went to work early. I had a meeting with a construction attorney I trusted, a shark named David, who specialized in contract disputes. I laid the log on his desk. He flipped through it, his eyebrows rising with every page. "You have signatures," he asked. "On everything I said. Material upgrades, labor hours, scope of work changes. They signed off on all of it. And they're trying to sell to a commercial developer. Closing is in 3 weeks." David smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. "Not anymore. With this lien in place, that title is toxic. The developer won't touch it. Your parents are in breach of contract with the developer if they can't deliver a clean title. They're stuck." But then he stopped. He was looking at a permit application I had included in the file, one of the early ones from 4 years ago for the structural foundation work. He squinted at it, then pulled a magnifying glass out of his drawer. "Ashley," he said slowly, "did you sign this permit application?" I looked at it. It was the application for the major structural overhaul. It had my name printed as the general contractor, my license number, and a signature at the bottom. "No," I said. "I was out of town that week. I remember because the project was delayed. My dad said he handled the paperwork." David looked up at me, his face serious. "This isn't your signature." "No. It looks like he tried to copy it, but the loop on the A is wrong. And this affidavit of independent contractor status," he slid another paper across. "I've never seen that before in my life." David leaned back in his chair. "Okay. The game just changed. This isn't just a civil dispute over unpaid bills anymore." "What do you mean?" "To get the rezoning approved and to secure the initial renovation loans 4 years ago, your father didn't just use your labor. He used your identity. He forged your signature on contractor affidavits and loan documents. He used your general contractor license number without your consent to bypass inspections and secure funding." I felt the room spin. My father, the man who preached about family honor, the man who called me his tough son, had committed felonies in my name. He hadn't just stolen my money. He had endangered my professional license. He had committed fraud. "What does this mean?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "It means David said that we aren't just freezing the sale. We have the leverage to burn the whole deal down. If we report this to the licensing board and the bank, your father isn't just looking at a failed sale. He's looking at prison time for fraud and forgery." He paused, watching me. "Do you want to go that far?" I thought about the text message. "Let's see how brave you are now." I thought about Morgan posing in the kitchen I built. I thought about the rent comment. "Draft the letter," I said. "Tell them everything." The day of the sale arrived 3 weeks later. It was a Tuesday, bright and sunny, the kind of day that feels like a new beginning. For my parents, it was supposed to be the day they became millionaires. For Morgan, it was the day her lifestyle brand finally got its funding. I wasn't at the title company, but David, my attorney, was. He was there to represent my interests as a lien holder. He told me later exactly how it went down, but honestly, I didn't need to be there to see it. I had watched them operate my whole life. I knew the script. They would have arrived early, dressed in their Sunday best, my father in his navy blazer, my mother in pearls. Morgan probably wore something beige and expensive-looking board, but secretly calculating how fast she could spend her share. They would have sat in the conference room accepting coffee from the paralegal, making small talk about the weather, waiting for the developer's team to slide the check across the mahogany table. They were expecting $950,000. They were already spending it in their heads. They were probably joking about how easy it had been to get rid of me, how smart they were to change the locks and cut the dead weight. Then the door opened. It wasn't the developer with a check. It was the title officer, looking pale and clutching a file that was far too thin to contain closing documents. Behind him walked the developer's attorney, looking furious. "We have a problem," the title officer said. My father, never one to handle friction well, laughed nervously. "What kind of problem?" "A typo." "The title is clouded," the officer said. "There is a mechanic's lien filed against the property for $145,000 in unpaid labor and materials. And there is a pending investigation regarding permit fraud and forgery attached to the deed history." The room must have gone silent enough to hear a pin drop. That's impossible, my father sputtered. That's my daughter. She's upset, but she has no legal standing. It was a family arrangement. It's a recorded lien, Mr. Chen, the developer's attorney cut in. And the fraud allegations are credible enough that our financing has been pulled. We don't touch properties with clouded titles. The deal is dead. They stood up. They packed their briefcases, and they walked out. Just like that $950,000 evaporated into the air conditioning. My phone rang at 10:15 in the morning. I was at my desk at work reviewing a spreadsheet for a high-rise project. I saw my father's name on the screen. I let it ring. It rang again. Then my mother called. Then Morgan. Finally, I answered my father's call. I didn't say hello. I just listened. Ashley. He was screaming so loud the audio distorted. What have you done? You selfish, ungrateful. You ruined it. The deal is off. Do you hear me? They walked away. I heard, I said, my voice calm, level, professional. David told me. You have to lift this lien right now, he shouted. You have to call them and tell them it was a mistake. Tell them you lied. If we don't sell, we can't pay the bridge loan we took out against the equity. We'll lose the house, Ashley. We'll lose everything. I leaned back in my chair. I can't do that, Dad. Why not? Because you want to punish us. Is that it? Because it wasn't a mistake, I said. And I didn't lie. You forged my signature. You committed fraud. And you breached our verbal contract regarding my equity in the property. I'm just following the procedure you set in motion when you decided to treat a business transaction like a family favor. We're your family, my mother screamed in the background. How can you do this to us? You fired me, I said. Remember, you changed the locks. You sent me that text. You wanted me to be brave. Well, this is what brave looks like. Brave looks like holding you accountable. I will sue you, my father roared. I will drag you to court until you have nothing. You can try, I said. But David has the forensic analysis of the forged permits ready to go to the district attorney. If you sue me, that file goes public. Do you really want to spend your retirement in a legal battle where the evidence sends you to prison? The silence on the other end was heavy, suffocating. It was the sound of a bully realizing he had picked a fight with someone who was no longer afraid of him. What do you want? He whispered. I want my $145,000, I said, plus interest, and I want you to never contact me again. I hung up. My hand wasn't even shaking. The aftermath wasn't quick, but it was absolute. Without the developer's money, the house of cards my parents had built collapsed. They had leveraged themselves to the hilt, taking out high-interest loans against the property's value, assuming the sale would wipe the slate clean. When the deal died, the creditors came calling. The bank foreclosed on the farmhouse 3 months later. Because of my lien, I was a secured creditor. When the bank auctioned off the property for significantly less than the developer had offered, I got paid first. I received a check for $145,000. My parents got nothing. The rest of the money went to the bank and the lawyers. They lost the house, they lost the land, they lost the retirement dream. They moved into a 2-bedroom rental apartment on the other side of town. Morgan had to get a job as a receptionist because the lifestyle brand had no funding. I didn't go to the auction. I didn't drive by the rental to gloat. I deposited the check and went back to work. 6 months later, I stood on a plot of land about 20 miles west of Nashville. It was raw land overgrown with brush untouched. It wasn't a historic site. It wasn't a renovation. It was a blank slate. I held a set of blueprints in my hands. They were my design. A small, modern house with big windows and a solid foundation. No rotting beams, no termites. And most importantly, no history. There is a final lesson in construction that applies to life too. It's called the architect of your own peace. We spend so much time trying to renovate relationships that were built on rotten foundations. We try to sand down the rough edges of our parents, patch the holes our siblings punch in the walls, and shore up the sagging floors of family obligation. We think if we just work hard enough, we can turn a ruin into a home. But you can't renovate a structure that was never meant to hold you. Sometimes the only way to be safe is to let the old house fall down. I watched the surveyor drive a stake into the ground, marking the corner of my new living room. I wasn't thinking about my parents. I wasn't thinking about Morgan. I wasn't thinking about revenge. The ultimate revenge isn't destruction. It's construction. It's the ability to build a life on a foundation that no one else can touch, behind a door that locks from the inside with a key that only you possess. I nodded to the surveyor. Let's break ground, I said. And for the first time in my life, I started building something that was entirely undeniably mine.